I am kind of new here, so those of you that haven't met me yet, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself first before we get into the topic. I grew up in Anger, North Carolina. I grew up in the 4-H horse program, doing horse judging and showing and that sort of thing. I've been riding since I was very young. It was our forced family activity, I like to say. I was not a horse girl right from the start, but soon became one and am still the only child that still rides of the three of us. So I guess it stuck. And then I went to NC State and did both my undergraduate and graduate work there. This is some of our research heard there at NC State. My research background there, I looked at just different management strategies to mitigate some of the laminitis causing metabolic issues that we have in horses that are grazing. So that's kind of what my background was there on research. And then NC State Extension wasn't hiring then, so Clemson got me. I spent 8 years with Clemson as an extension agent down there as a livestock agent. So developed a Master Equine Manager program there. That's my Master Equine group. Did a lot of the same things that I do up here, a lot of pasture calls and that sort of thing. A few years ago, my life has changed a little bit recently, but I do enjoy showing paint horses. I really enjoy starting young horses. Is kind of so this was a young gray mare that I started, and then took her through to just the Pinto World Show, and then these are some other ones that I've trained. But my husband and I, we along with his family, we manage a farm just north of Gaffney, South Carolina. So this is their family farm. We run stocker cattle and then have our own horse herd and grow some hay as well. And then my most recent life change, I guess, he was born in July. His name is Trip. So that's our little family there. Thank you. Yeah. I know. He has been on a horse. Sunday we just let him sit there for a minute. But yeah. Let that get started up. Okay, the reason why all of you are here today is to learn about selecting quality horse hay. So just, if you didn't get the slides, they are back there on that back table. But we'll define hay quality, discuss the factors that affect that quality, and then we want to describe how that forage quality is evaluated and then how we match it to the animal requirements. What is hay quality? So essentially it is the capacity of that forage to supply an animal with its nutrient requirements. And there's 3 factors there included: palatability, the digestibility of that, and then its chemical composition. So will the animal eat it? Will they be able to digest it? Once it's digested, will that forage provide that animal with the nutrients that it needs for growth and good health and performance and all of that good stuff? Essentially, the conversion of that forage into maintained, equine performance and good health is going to be the ultimate measure of quality of that hay. Most horse owners and producers, when they think about hay quality, they're going to think about the sensory characteristics of that hay. The color, the smell, the cleanliness, which of course is the most important for horse hay as far as the physical characteristics go. In addition to that, most nutritionists think about the chemical components of that hay and how it looks on paper once we evaluate all of the nutrients inside of that hay. As far as physical characteristics, what is a horse quality hay compared to what we think of as cow quality or goat quality or something like that? Essentially, it's going to come down, most important, I guess, is cleanliness. So we certainly don't want any weeds, any debris that might be in there, dust or mold are things that horses certainly cannot consume compared to ruminants. they can tolerate a few more of those things. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for them either, but things get broken down in the rumen that don't necessarily get broken down in the digestive system of the horse. So the maturity of that hay is based on the need, but we don't want it overly mature for the horse either. The horse, they have a shorter retention time. That hay spends a lot less time in the digestive tract compared to a cow or a goat or a sheep or something like that. So they can digest a much more mature hay than a horse can, just based on the amount of time it spends in contact with those microbes that are in the digestive tract. So that certainly affects the digestibility. A few things that we can infer on grass hays. In general, cool season are going to be greater quality than our warm seasons. And this, when I talk about quality, I'm talking about digestibility, energy, the nutrient components of that hay. So, and I'll talk about why that is in a minute. But some common cool season hays that we feed are timothy, fescue, orchard grass, but fescue is going to be the one that can really be grown here. There's some orchard grass that can be grown. Timothy can kind of be grown on an annual basis, a reseeding basis, but it's really predominantly grown up north and shipped down. And then Bermuda is an example of a warm season grass that's grown here in the Carolinas as well. But in general, our grass hays are going to be lower in energy versus our legumes. And then, of course, the quality is going to vary considerably, even within those species, and I'll show you that with a little bit of data. But it's going to vary considerably with our growing, harvesting, and storage conditions. Yeah?
Sorry, that went past me a little fast. Of the cool season hays, you said that fescue is really the only one that grows well here?
Mm-hmm. Yep. There is some orchard, there is some timothy grown here, but they're not as hardy as fescue is. So locally, fescue orchard grass mixes are going to be predominantly what you find locally. And then our legumes. So they're a little bit different. They fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. So essentially they make their own protein, and they're not dependent on nitrogen fertilization to make protein. So that's why our alfalfa, our clover hays, they're going to have higher energy, higher calcium, and higher protein in those just in general compared to our grass hays. Of course, with that can come some issues too. So increased urination. If there's more protein than that animal needs, then they have to dispense of that urea somehow, and that's in urination. So you might notice that in your stall cleaning or something like that, and even in the smell, if there's a lot of urea in the barn, or ammonia smell. And then increased energy. Some people say that the alfalfa makes their horse hot, that just might be just a little extra energy that animal didn't necessarily need. And then that ammonia smell as well from increased urination. So species, I kind of mentioned this already. Legumes are higher in quality, higher in energy than our grass mixtures. Our cool seasons are higher in quality than our warm seasons. But this is because of some anatomy differences and mostly due to the temperature in which they're grown. So plants that are grown at higher temperatures, our summer-grown grasses, produce lower quality forages due to lignification. So lignin is kind of what gives bark and trees that structure. We have our non-structural carbohydrates. Lignin is a structural carbohydrate, and it's indigestible to the horse. So the more lignin that we have in the plant, the less digestible that plant is to the animal. Here again is just some common grass, hay, forage species that we have here. So in general, our annuals are going to be more digestible than our perennials. And again, those cool seasons, more digestible than the warm seasons. So tall fescue, orchard grass, timothy, I'm sure you guys are very familiar with those. A lot of times Timothy is lower on the digestibility scale compared to tall fescue or orchard grass. My theory is that Timothy has a very identifiable seed head on it, and so a lot of times we wait until that seed head gets on Timothy so folks know what they're buying and that sort of thing, but that means it's more mature when it's cut if it has that seed head on it. Just a theory of mine as to why.
You might answer this later on, but is it too late to throw seed out now? Fescue or fescue rye mix? Or?
Ideally, you would have wanted to plant those cool seasons by mid-October. There is a chance now that those small seedlings come up and then we get a hard frost and it kills those small seedlings. There's also a chance that, if you're putting it out in, an established pasture, that the taller forage will protect that against the hard frost, and that you'll still get a good establishment. So you're kind of just taking a risk now that that's what you put out might die if it gets a hard frost.
If I put straw on top of it, would that help?
It could help, yeah.
Like a patch about the size of this room that,
Yeah.
to try to get something to grow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't mix it with ryegrass though.
Okay.
We don't want to plant ryegrass in tall fescue or plant them at the same time because they compete, and ryegrass is much more prolific than tall fescue, so it's going to win every time, and it's an annual, so then you won't have anything again and you'll have to buy more seed again the next year. So Of our warm season annuals, crabgrass is probably the highest quality forage that we can grow in the summertime as far as digestibility goes. Millets, they can get pretty stemmy pretty quick. A lot of times you get some palatability issues with millets, but they can be a really good option for horses that need something to munch on but don't necessarily need those extra calories or something like that. Same with some of those others. Yep, it can get away pretty quick. So this is kind of another way of looking at some of what I've said, those inferences, right? So is my arrow showing up here? Yeah. So in general, we have our warm season perennial grasses. On average, they're going to be lower in digestible dry matter compared to our annuals, and then compared to our cool season perennials and our cool season annuals, and then legumes are higher. But notice there's a lot of variability within those species too. So you can have a really high quality warm season perennial that's still on average with a cool season perennial. So there's still a lot of variability within those forage species as well. And then here is another way we can kind of look at this. So this one here, on your left is crude protein, and then we have total digestible nutrients. Total digestible nutrients is a measure of energy. We use it more in ruminants. In horses, we tend to use digestible energy when we're doing ration balancing and that sort of thing. But these were all samples that were submitted to the North Carolina State Fair. So these are samples grown in North Carolina, so you can kind of see, on average, what's here, local. But on average, these red dots are the average, and then the line in the middle is the median, and then you have the highest and the lowest of those outlier points there. But you can have some poorer quality alfalfa that and have some Bermuda grass here that's higher quality than even average quality alfalfa. That might be kind of rare in general. Most of it is going to be lower quality than alfalfa in crude protein. But in general, you can kind of see how the trends go here. So, if anything today that you take away is that maturity stage at harvest is going to be the most important factor in determining the forage quality, the digestibility of that hay. So as that young plant starts off, it's highly digestible to the animal. There's a lot of leaf area. And then as it grows taller and taller, you get more stem, less leaf. Of course, the hay producer wants to shoot somewhere in the middle because they have to have something to be able to cut and bale. It's really hard to bale these really short plants. So we want hit this target area, kind of where they cross in quality and in growth stage here. Again, as fiber increases, as that stem portion of that plant increases, then the digestibility and digestible energy of that plant is going to decrease.
When you talk about, like when it talks about seed heading, you know, like that you want the seed to head before it's cut, or you don't want it to head, let it, or, I mean, and what does heading mean? I guess I need to understand the question.
Yeah. So you see, like, heading is when it just starts to put on a seed head. So that's kind of in that target window. A few plants, maybe 30% of the plants out in the field are going to have a seed head on them, and that's kind of going to be that target window of when we want to cut that hay. As more and more plants put on a seed head, that just means the plant's getting more and more mature again out there. But I am going to tell you that it depends on your horse too. If you have, an overweight kind of pasture puff out there, then this more mature hay is probably going to be what he needs, so that he has, good gut fill and is not getting more calories than he needs also. But we'll get into an example of that. So what about cutting? I'm sure a lot of you have heard, it's first cutting hay, it's second cutting hay, or something like that. So often second cutting is thought to be the highest quality, but I still want to make sure that the takeaway is that the maturity at harvest is still going to be the most important factor. It's not necessarily when in the season it was cut. Of course, your first farmer may not cut their first cutting of hay until June 19th when it's in late bloom or something. So that hay, although it's still the first cutting, it's the first time he's cut that field this year, is still going to be a lot lower quality compared to the farmer that had its first cut May 2nd. He might be getting a second cutting on June 19th. So the difference there is going to be huge between those two hay crops, but it's still the same first cutting. So then it kind of goes along still with maturity, that leaf to stem ratio. So that's something that you can kind of touch and feel whenever you're choosing a hay. The softer it is, the more likely it is to have a high leaf to stem ratio as well. So as the plant matures, the proportion of leaves declines. Fertilization. So the measure of crude protein in a grass is directly proportional to the amount of nitrogen that was applied. So nitrogen goes in to make amino acids make crude protein. So if you're looking for crude protein, it's going to be highly dependent on the amount of nitrogen that was applied to that field. Not so much with the legumes because they make their own nitrogen, make their own protein. But that's why the comparison there is so different. Of course, can be field losses, right, from rain damage, leaf loss. That's a big problem with alfalfa. If it's gotten up too dry, you get a lot of leaf shatter. So then you end up with a bale of stems because all the leaves fall out as they're trying to put it into a bale. Plants continue to respire also after it's baled. And then, of course, storage losses. But most of you, I'm sure, are storing your hay in barns, covered, not outside. But storage losses from storing bales outside can be up to 40%, which is a huge loss. You're giving away half of your hay there. But rain damage. So that's something that's also, you're going to lose a little bit of vitamins or something like that if the hay gets cut and it gets rained on shortly after. There'll be some leaching of some minerals and some vitamins in that field. But if, say, the farmer had decided to wait another 2 weeks until he had dry to cut that hay, your quality is going to decline much more rapidly in those 2 weeks of leaving that grass to grow to a maturity level versus if he had cut it and it just rained a little bit right after he cut it. Of course, you don't want it to rain after it's mostly dry and then bale and you have mold issues, but it's not that big of a deal if you get a little bit of rain right after the plant is cut. And this is just some data on storage. Like I said, most of you guys are probably storing your hay inside, and you don't have to worry about this. But if you were having round bales that were kind of stored outside, you can kind of see up to 40% in the loss of that hay crop or that hay roll there. And then it gets compounded because then the animal doesn't eat it because it tastes bad. So you lose palatability also. I'm sure that non-structural carbohydrates, many of you have read about that. It's kind of a buzz thing in horse nutrition. And that's what I did a lot of my research stuff on at NC State as well. But those non-structural carbohydrates, they increase throughout the day when it's most hay cut in the afternoon after the dew has burned off. So the time of day that hay crop is cut also affects the non-structural carbohydrates in that hay crop as well. So if for some reason it was cut in the morning, or maybe even half the field was cut in the morning and half was cut in the afternoon, there can be a lot of variability between those bales because non-structural carbohydrates increase throughout the day. Of course, any anti-quality components, you guys know to look for these. Thorns, barbs, foxtail can be a big problem in our cool season perennial grasses like fescue. We really don't have a way to control foxtail in fescue fields. It can be a bigger problem in fall cut fescue versus in the spring. Mm-hmm.
I brought Scott some hay this spring. I got hay from a new guy because my old guy, that's the only person I bought from since I lived here. He couldn't find anybody to make small bales, couldn't find help. And it had what I call foxtail in it. And I was like, oh my God. And I came over here and Scott said, yeah, we call it foxtail here, but it's not going to kill your horse. It's not like what I think of as the barb things that are going to tear them up. So what's the difference? What is what we get? Because I've got hay with what's lovely called foxtail.
It is foxtail. There are several different varieties of foxtail too. So we have like yellow, knotroot, and green, and so they're just different size seed heads on the top. And there are other types of foxtail that they get out west that are much bigger, but the barbs on this foxtail still could cause issues. They tend to be softer than the larger giant foxtail that we don't have here, but I have not seen issues in any of my horses anyways. We will feed the bales to our horses that have some foxtail that we can't really sell. They tend to pick through it and leave it, and I've never seen them have issues with it.
Every piece of it, it's gone.
Yeah.
We see what looks like the foxtail out in the field all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The grass looks like fescue.
Yeah.
And is it palatable?
They won't eat it. Mm-mm. No, unfortunately. So then it just propagates because, puts out a seed and they don't eat it, and yeah.
How do you tell, other than the seed head, can you tell from the plant?
There are ways to identify them. I would even have to look it up. It's difficult to tell. Yeah.
So I usually know late August, early September, but of course the foxtail now is just all over my pastures. What's your strategy for knowing a little later and maybe getting it before it heads, before it goes to seed?
Yeah, I think you would have to continue mowing throughout the fall just to keep ahead of it and to keep it from going to seed. And of course, there's some that are perennial and there's some varieties that are annual. So, there is a chemical that you can put out at the beginning of the year that prevents seed germination, and that would help with any annual varieties. But if you had perennial foxtail, then it doesn't help. No, if you're seeding in the fall, then you would get your fescue germinated in the fall. And so you're just you put it out in like late February. It's called Prowl H2O. And you're just trying to get ahead of early spring germination of those annual weeds. It's expensive though, so yeah.
Is that chemical toxic?
No, it's labeled for pastures. It's the only one that's labeled for pastures, but yeah.
How do you spell that?
Prowl, P-R-O-W-L, H2O.
When the seed heads were on, I always thought that they provided more vitamins, seed heads on grasses.
Seed heads are mostly starch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, think of like oats. I mean, oats are a seed, so they're just predominantly starch. I'm sure that there's other nutrients in there too, but
Sorry, I got one more question about
That's
that.
okay.
So if you continue to mow through the fall, then you wouldn't really be able to stockpile your grasslands.
right. And so, I mean, you might be able to kind of time it just right, but each year is going to be different when that timing is. So, I mean, we have foxtail in our pastures too, and I mean we just mowed. They'd already gone to seed, so but so we're behind it too. It's difficult, I know, and I hate that I don't have a great answer for you, but. And then, so the biochemical factors that we kind of worry about in hay, lignin, kind of mentioned that, so that's that stemminess that we get. Tannins, so that's the bitterness that you taste in wine, tannins. Some legumes, like Lespedeza hay, is high in tannins, and so we can get goats and stuff to eat it because goats have a protein in their saliva that breaks down tannins, but horses don't have that, so they'll eat it for a little while and then it becomes bitter to them and then they quit eating it. So you can kind of run into palatability issues with that. Nitrates, some forages are nitrate accumulators, so the more nitrogen fertilizer they put out, some situations cause that plant to accumulate those nitrates. A lot of them are warm season grasses. Johnson grass does it, Bermuda grass can do it. If there's heavy nitrogen rates applied to it. There's also, again, Johnson grass, when it hits a frost, produces a cyanide-like compound called prussic acid that can be toxic as well. And then endophytes. So most of you know about the endophyte that's in fescue that can cause issues, reproductive issues in our mares. Blister beetles is another one. So we don't necessarily have them here, but when you ship alfalfa in from other parts of the country, this is something to be sure you watch out for, check your hay for, make sure that there are not any blister beetles in that. Ingestion of several of them can be deadly to the horse, but just touching them, they get blisters on their nose while they're eating. Yeah.
So the blister beetles, it's the southwest U.S.
Mm-hmm.
The alfalfa's grown in what states?
Like Arizona, they grow a lot of alfalfa out in Utah, Arizona, that sort of
They
thing.
have the blister beetles, or they don't?
Yeah, they do.
You don't have them here?
Not that I know of, but it's possible.
Is the fescue that has the undivided,
Mm-hmm.
if you got non-indified, would that be better? Maybe?
Not necessarily as far as like digestibility and mineral and vitamin content and all that, but it would be safe to feed to pregnant mares.
Just generally.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the preferred pregnant cow.
I mean, yeah, we do have reproductive issues in our ruminants too with endophyte infected fescue.